Hello everyone, it's me, Aaron, Professor Thor, your guide to all things geeky, and welcome to another episode of Comic Class, the show on this channel every single week where we just geek out about comic books. That all out of the way? Good, because we got no time today. We have to jump right into today's episode because, as you can tell from my surroundings, I am very, very busy this month because this is the month of Thorgy-ween, in which every single day I am going to have a video dedicated to all things spooky and scary. But I'm still, because I'm a crazy person, going to put out every single week a regularly scheduled episode of Comic Class because I know that you guys at home enjoy these videos more than anything else on my channel, so I'm still going to do that for you guys. Plus, I promised you guys a long time ago that I was going to talk about all the Marvel Generation titles when they were all done, when they were all wrapped up, so that is what we are going to do today. However, before we get into that, there is something else that I promised you guys a long time ago, and I need to finally address it. I told you guys that when Secret Empire was finally all over with, I was going to do a Q&A video on that, which you guys would ask me your questions about that event. I would give you my thoughts in reply to your questions, A's, if you could call them, in response to your Q's. But then other things kept coming up. Legacy came by, that was already here. Now we're into the generation stuff. So this is what we're going to do. I promised you guys I was going to do it. We're still going to do it. However, it's now going to be a Q&A on Secret Empire, Legacy, and Marvel Generations. Any questions or thoughts or opinions that you guys want to share about those, we're going to do a Q&A episode on that next week. And if you want to submit your questions, do it in the comment section of this video. I know you guys have been submitting questions to me on Twitter, on Tumblr. You submitted them in previous videos that I did. I need them to all be in one place, so they have to be right here below in this video. And next week, that will be the Q&A episode on all three of these massive events. Woo! Okay, now that that's all out of the way, let's go ahead and actually get into talking about Marvel Generations. Now, for anybody who doesn't know what Marvel Generations is, it was a series of 10 one-shots that came out over the course of 9 weeks that followed 10 legacy characters as they went back in time and met their predecessors. Every single one of them was meant to kind of show the earlier versions of these characters talking to the new versions of these characters and basically kind of helping them to find themselves. It was not meant to be a massive big thing where you had to read every single issue and link from one thing to the next. There was no overarching story. Every single one of them was a character study. They were all meant to be about one character's personal journey, and that's the first thing I have to say. Applaud to you, Marvel. I talk about how I'm sick of all these Marvel events, which is true, but one of the reasons why I'm sick of all these Marvel events is because it's always some big massive thing that comes out of nowhere, blows everything up, ruins all these storylines you had been building up to, and quote unquote changes everything, only to then change everything again later, and you try and make them bigger and more bloated with every single one. This one, you can read each issue individually, you don't have to pick them all up. They're just about these specific characters, and they are small character studies. They are just stories about characters. They are about these characters going on journeys to try and grow as human beings. Awesome! This was a big change of pace, and man, was it needed right now. But I am now going to go down every single one of these issues and examine how I felt every single one of them did, and for everybody out there who has not read any of these issues, I'm also going to kind of sum up the big change that came to these characters, or at least the big lesson that they learned. Except for the first one, I will not be doing that with the Hulk issue, because since it was the issue that kicked all this off, I already did an entire episode spotlighting that one issue. If you want to check that out, there should be a card popping up right now on one side of me or another. And if you don't see that card, then there will be a link to it at the end of this episode. Everybody good? Fine? Cool. Let's go into the second one that came out, which was The Phoenix, which starred the young time/dimensional displaced Jean Grey with the older Jean Grey. I found this one to be very interesting because typically these were different characters, younger characters going back in time to meet the former characters when they were a little bit closer to their age. I think that's a great premise. But because of the weird situation that Jean Grey finds herself in, where she has been brought from the past to the present, she now goes back in time to meet herself when she was older. Comics are weird. But this was actually written by Cullen Bunn, and I find that a bit odd because Cullen Bunn is writing her on the X-Men Blue Book. I like the X-Men Blue Book. I think it's doing a pretty fine job. But I'm actually really digging the actual Jean Grey series, which is written by Dennis Hopeless, and all I could think was, this is going to be just about Jean Grey. It's not about the rest of the team, just Jean. Why isn't Dennis Hopeless writing this issue? That seemed a bit odd. It seemed like at least you should have had the two of them working together on this issue, but that's aside the point. Basically, she meets up with Jean Grey. Jean Grey, at this point, is at the height of her power. It's after she's been possessed by the Phoenix, but when her and the Phoenix were working together, it was before the Hellfire Club came in and brainwashed her and turned her into the Dark Phoenix. So Jean finds herself in a very odd spot where she has to now look over at her older self, knowing her history and going, I could maybe prevent this. I could maybe stop her from turning evil. And if you've been reading the current Jean Grey series, you know the Phoenix is coming back to Earth, and Jean now has to deal with the fact that, hey, the Phoenix is coming for me. The thing that happened to my older self, that eventually took her down a dark path, made her do some horrible stuff, and led to her death, that's now all going to happen to me. I tried to avoid it, but the Phoenix is coming right for me. I now have to kind of confront her and actually wonder, okay, what can I learn from her? Can I learn any tips on how to control the Phoenix? Right now she's doing a fine job, but I know it's not going to last, so what can I learn from this? And the lesson that she learns from her older self is that, okay, my older self wasn't perfect. She had been hearing this whole time about how amazing Jean Grey was, about how she was a legend, about how she was one of the things that defined the X-Men, and how she was all-powerful. And she meets her, and it's at a time when Jean thought the rest of the X-Men were dead, and she sees, yeah, she's not all there. I mean, she hasn't become brainwashed yet, but she's hurt by this. She's being emotionally affected by this. And that's okay. She was not some giant idol goddess who wasn't touched by human emotions. She was human. And that's okay. And the lesson she learned is, it's okay to be freaked out about what could possibly happen, but also towards the end, she has to face this decision of, do I tell her whether or not she is going to become possessed and turn evil? And she then decides, I'm not going to change the future. And that was also the big lesson she learned. She had felt like she had no control over her own life. This was a moment in which she was given the ultimate choice. Do you change what is going to happen to you? Do you change the future? Or the past, in your case. Time travel's weird. And she goes, okay, I choose not to change it. She made that choice. She did have that power. So that actually does mean she has more control over things than she thought she did. So that's the big lesson that she learned. And the other thing that's really important about this issue is that when I read this at the time, it really seemed to be kind of like winking and nodding at the audience of, oh, the tale of adult Jean Grey is not over with just yet. And I was like, it seems kind of odd. I wonder what's going to come of that. And now, since that issue has come out, we all know Marvel has announced adult Jean Grey is coming back. And it makes me kind of wonder, okay, is she actually rising from the dead? Because Grant Morrison, when he killed her 14 years ago, he made it very clear, no, I'm erasing her soul from existence. She is absolutely gone. Big old period mark, can never come back. However, if you bring her back through time travel, that is indeed a loophole around that. So it does kind of make me wonder, alright, so did her going back in time and mean her older self now change that? Is that going to be what links her here? Is she going to somehow bring a part of her psyche with her and the Phoenix takes control of that and makes her alive? Because again, if you've read the last 2 issues of the Jean Grey series, you know the ghost of Jean Grey is now haunting younger Jean Grey. That book is kind of weird now that I say that out loud, but it's actually a lot of fun. I definitely recommend it to people. So that is now a thing that's happening. Ever since she got back from the past, she now has the ghost of adult Jean Grey with her, and I'm wondering, okay, do you have that because you brought it from the past with you? Because according to Grant Morrison, her ghost should just not exist here. She's completely gone. So it is making me wonder, is that the thing that's going to get possessed by the Phoenix and then it takes on the form of adult Jean Grey? Is that how she's going to come back? I'm just spitballing ideas out there, but it's weird to me that this is one of those issues that was like, okay, that's a fun little thing, and now it's like, oh, this might actually have led into the next big thing that's going to happen with the X-Men. Speaking of the X-Men, the next one of these books was Wolverine. It was Logan and Laura Kinney. And Laura Kinney comes back, and this one was a bit unique from all these other ones, because you've been reading these and it's like, okay, the older self is going to meet this younger self, and they're going to give them some lessons, and that's what they're going to take back with them to the present. But in this one, it's not even being told from Laura Kinney's point of view. The whole thing is being told from Logan's point of view. And it's at a point in time when Logan tried to settle down, he tried to have a family with this woman who already had a child, and they just went, no, I can't do it. I'm the Wolverine. People are going to come for this child. I can't do it. And he tries to leave. And this was at a point in which the Hand was trying to kill that child. Laura pops up and then starts helping him fight off the Hand. And so the two of them team up. And then at the end of the whole thing, Logan basically goes, listen, I'm not stupid. You're like, what, my kid from the future or something like that? I mean, I can tell, I'm used to this kind of crazy stuff. And then she basically goes, it's something like that. And so Logan is about to walk away from all this, and Laura is the one who gives him advice. I actually really dug that. That was a nice little change from what we have been getting so far. Laura is the one that tells Logan, listen, stop this whole I'm a loner, I can't be close to people crap, okay? That child's life was in danger because you weren't here to protect it, alright? That child was in danger for things that didn't relate to you at all, but you're going to continue going around being this, oh, I'm the Wolverine, I can never be close to people. Cut it out right now. Go in there, read a story to that kid, be a freaking dad. And I was like, this is such a great moment for both these characters. This is the thing that Laura needed to kind of get off her chest. She needed to basically go, listen, I needed a dad, you weren't my dad to me, and Wolverine needed to be told, go be a dad. So I love that this one was different from all the other books because Laura has already gotten that speech from Wolverine. We have seen in the all-new Wolverine series, Laura already received speeches from Wolverine about, hey man, you don't have to be the monster that you are. You don't have to be that. You can rise above that. You can be better than what they wanted you to be. And she kind of has. She has now gone on her path of redemption. So if she went back in time and saw Wolverine when he was at his lowest, he would not have given her any good advice. He wouldn't have advanced her further. However, she can now give Wolverine back when he was at his lowest some advice to try and set him on the right path. I thought this was awesome. Next up was the Hawkeye's one, and this one, in several ways, I think worked the best for me. Because this one, it was just the standard story of what these generation books were supposed to be. It was the older one causing the younger one to learn some kind of a lesson, to appreciate something about the older one. And first off, it's written by Kelly Thompson, who's been doing the current Hawkeye series starring Kate Bishop, and I actually really dig that series, and I actually think that Kelly Thompson is quickly rising up to be one of the better writers at Marvel. She's one of those writers that not a lot of people are talking about, but I've honestly really dug everything she's done at that company. But she tells the story of Kate Bishop. She finds herself on an island with some of the greatest assassins in the world and some of the greatest marksmen, and they're all in this big battle royale fight with each other. And she ends up meeting the younger Hawkeye, and it's the really younger Hawkeye. It's him like right after he started being Hawkeye. So he doesn't even know anybody else in the Marvel Universe at this point. But slowly she gets him to trust her, and they start talking with each other. And I love that they actually kind of have like little bonding moments here of just her going, wow, I never saw Clint when he was my age. I never really kind of got to know him around this point. Like I always kind of saw him when he was older, and I've seen him kind of at his lowest, but I've also seen him when he's at his highest. I never saw him when he was like me, just kind of like right there in the middle. I'm not at my lowest, I'm not at my highest, I'm still growing up. It's cool to see him when he still has that potential to be something even bigger. But she also learned a couple of other things about Hawkeye. She always knew about his relationship to Swordsmaster, the guy who trained him to be the world's greatest marksman, but also basically tried to force him into a life of crime. And Swordmaster is there on this island, and they confront each other, and Kate goes, you know, I've had kind of the same relationship with my father. He's involved in crime, and it's been a very complicated relationship. And now seeing Clint go through this with his father figure, it makes me really appreciate Clint even more. It makes me understand he can actually relate to a lot of the stuff that I've been going through. And let me just go ahead and say, the reason why I kind of enjoyed this one, I don't know if I'd say I enjoyed this one the most, but it had the biggest effect on me, was because I really like the character of Kate Bishop. I do. However, I always loved the character of Clint Barton, and I feel like Clint Barton has just been turned into a sack of crap over the last couple of years. Ever since the Matt Fraction run, his character has gone from being quirky smartass to guy who life has just beaten down and turned to crap. Where Kate would just keep rising up, and she kept kind of turning to Clint being like, what the hell is wrong with you? What happened in your life? Come on, old man, get your stuff together. And the reason why I kind of dug this one is there was a moment at the end of this where she basically just tells him, listen, I'll just lay it all out for you. I'm from the future, I know who you are, you train me, and I never really got to say thank you. I never really got to tell you how important that was for me. And I just want you to know I appreciate you. And everything that you've done, listen, it's all been for the better. It has actually helped me as a person, so thank you for that. And granted, Clint had fallen asleep during all this, so he didn't hear any of this. Classic Clint Barton. Like I said, I do think they kind of turned Clint Barton's life to crap over the past couple of years and kind of made him a loser, but I will still admit, some of the things they did to him keep up with his character throughout all these years. That's something that he would absolutely have done. The fact that he fell asleep while she was giving him this big heartfelt speech, I'm like, that's Clint right there. So I was like, you know what? That's all I needed to hear. I just needed Kate to at one point go, hey man, thanks for everything you do. Now you can go back to doing whatever you want with these two characters. I just needed to hear that, thanks for all your hard work. That's it, that's all I needed. So I appreciated that in this issue. Also, speaking of Clint having always been a scumbag, there is a moment in here in which he actually tries to hit on Kate, and she's just like, ew, no, what are you doing? I actually kind of dug that because I was like, that's totally what the old Clint Barton would have done. Old Clint Barton totally would have been that piece of crap. As I said, I think they turned him into a piece of crap, but he was always kind of a piece of crap. So I like that they kind of perfectly captured that level of Clint Barton that he always was in this. Now next up is the Thor's issue, and I actually really dug what they did with this one because I pictured that Jane would be going back to see original recipe Thor back when he had the hammer. No, she went back in time to before he could even lift the hammer, which I love that they did that because Jane had known Thor when he was a hero. She knew all the lessons that he could possibly teach her. She didn't know him back when he was still that reckless youth who was like, listen, I'm a Viking god, all I want to do is punch things and get drunk. That's all I want to do with my life. So I actually really dug that that's what they decided to do with it, but it did raise the question, okay, well what on earth is the lesson that this young, reckless Thor could teach her when she already knew the Thor who had his act together? And the lesson that he teaches her is that at this point, Jane is trying to figure out what am I going to do? Because my human body is dying of cancer. Every time that I pick up this hammer, I transform into a god, but it also undoes all the chemotherapy that's trying to get rid of the cancer in my body. So either I let myself die as Jane Foster, or I just pick up this hammer one day and I never let it down. That's it. That's who I am for the rest of existence. I'm just Thor. I never go back to being Jane Foster. And after they go in and defeat Apocalypse, yeah, they fight Apocalypse in here, which is actually pretty cool. After they defeat Apocalypse, Thor is out there partying, and he's there with all these other humans, and he loves these other humans. He wants to be around these other humans. He wants to party with them until dawn comes up. He wants to get drunk with them. He wants to go home with them. And Jane is watching this, and she's like, Thor, even back then, had a connection to humans. That was what made him special. That's what made him different from the other gods. That is the thing that would eventually lead to him being great. Eventually lead to him being worthy. I don't know if I can abandon my connection to humans. I don't know if I can abandon being Jane Foster. So it actually did raise a very good question for what would happen to Jane Foster in the future. So okay, we're now halfway through these books, and so far, perfect track record. Sure, I didn't think that each of these books were perfect 10s, but I liked every single one of them to some extent. That leads us into the Iron Man one. Yeah, you guys know me. I think that Brian Michael Bendis, sometimes he's great, sometimes he's not so great. I think it is very accurate that he has 2 books out in Generations for that exact reason, and I'll get into that later. But with the Iron Man one, it's of course starring Riri Williams and Tony Stark. However, there is a twist on this. All the other characters have been going back in time to meet their predecessors. With Riri, she goes into the future. And at first, listen, I'll admit, when I saw that, I was like, oh, of course, Bendis is the guy who wants to be different. But then I saw and thought, this is actually smart. They actually should do this because Tony Stark is a futurist. The entire point of Iron Man is he's the guy always looking towards the future. So if you wanted to take Riri and send her to the future instead of the past, that'd make a lot of sense. Also, Tony's in a coma right now. We know he's coming out of that someday. We know he's gonna come back. So it would of course make sense that she would meet him in the future at some point. But also, Tony Stark, if she traveled back in time to when he was just starting out as Iron Man, and he was a drunk, she wouldn't have learned any lessons from that. She wouldn't have grown as a person. However, going into the future when he just continued to learn, continued to become bigger and brighter, that makes sense. And in the future, he has actually kind of helped to establish a utopia. I mean, sure, there's still crime, there's still villains and such, but they have figured out a way to fight crime without actually destroying cities, without putting people's lives in danger. They have come up with the smartest ways to actually combat stuff. People are actually living happy, peaceful lives. Tony Stark is the Sorcerer Supreme, which is a little bit odd, but from what I understand, if you've been reading Infamous Iron Man, then that makes sense. But I decided to trade weight on Infamous Iron Man, so I have to wait and see how that's explained, but whatever. Aside from that, I'll dismiss that. But okay, so this is actually a unique approach to this. This actually made sense why you would do that. Sending her to the future? Perfect. Plus, she's just a kid. She's going to grow up one day, and she is a scientist, so she has to be thinking about what are the amazing things I'm going to build in the future. How can I help to build a better future? So seeing a better future, perfect. That actually works wonderfully for her. So I think that the concept behind this issue was actually really darn good. Here's the problem. Bendis, sometimes his dialogue is great. Sometimes he's able to perfectly capture very natural dialogue, and it works wonders. Sure, I think he overuses that whole system, and I also think that he repeats things a little too much, but even then, a lot of the times his dialogue is really good. But other times, he just goes overboard with his Bendis speak of people just repeating things back and forth to each other and just very quickly quipping back and forth at each other and just throwing in there a lot of repetitions. And holy cow, does he do that in this issue. Again, I think the concept of this issue is solid, but oh my god, this is some of the worst example of Bendis speak I've ever seen. If anybody out there wants to know what you mean when you say Bendis speak, this is the issue to show them. The dialogue in this issue was so quippy back and forth over and over again, repeating things back and forth over and over again, I almost couldn't get through this thing. The concept of it is so good, but the dialogue is awful in this issue. And also, the artwork, it's good trippy stuff that tries to show off like the high technology future and also the mysticism of the Sorcerer Supreme Tony Stark. But then sometimes it just feels like a different artist coming in there. Maybe it's a different inker in there, but just suddenly it will just change so much that's jarring. And honestly, it's like, okay, dude, if you couldn't make every page of this look consistent, you shouldn't have gotten this artist in there. You should have waited until he could match this deadline. You should have waited until it was done, is what I'm trying to say. And I hate saying that because my art skills are horrendous, so I hate criticizing any artist out there, but oh boy, yeah, the art is kind of jarring in this issue. So it's one of those in which it's like, man, you had a good blueprint, but the guy building this house didn't know what the tools were. So that was the first one of these that I didn't really enjoy, and that leads me into the second one of these that I didn't really enjoy, which was the Captain Marvel, Captain Marvel issue. Now, let me just go ahead and say, I am not quite as attached to this one as I would be to the others, simply because I have no connection to Marvel. Like, he died off long before I even started reading comics. I have read some of his stuff when I went back and read some of the old Avengers stuff, but he was never that guy that I really pined for. That guy who I was literally like, oh, I wish that we could have more adventures with this guy. I really never got much of a sense of his personality, much of a sense of what he stood for. So when I think about, okay, he's got to come in here and teach some lessons to the younger generation, I'm like, I don't know what lessons he's going to teach. Like, I don't know what thing Carol could learn from his past that will really apply to her. So I didn't really go into this really like, oh yeah, Marvel, let's see what he's doing. However, at the same time, I absolutely love the Kelly Sue DeConnick run on Captain Marvel. I think that she really made that character something special. She really rose the character of Carol Danvers up to being an A-class hero. And when All New, All Different Marvel started, and she was now the head of Alpha Flight, that series started off wonderfully. And then Civil War II came in, and Civil War II screwed up her character more than any other character I've seen since Spider-Man and One More Day. Yes, I will say that. I think they wrecked the character of Captain Marvel, and they need to fix her because she's such an important character. And as I said, you had 2 creators in a row come in here and really make her something special, something that people wanted to admire, something that people wanted to live up to being. There were entire groups of people coming together at conventions dressed up as Captain Marvel because she was inspiring that kind of a fan base. And then they wrecked her so bad in Civil War II. So I'm like, okay, if the whole point of Generations is for these legacy characters to kind of learn a lesson that will move them forward in life, hoo boy, Carol really needs that. You really need that redemption thing. And it's very odd because you had a year worth of storylines of Carol's character just being wrecked, and other writers have come in here and tried to redeem her. Like Nick Spencer in Secret Empire had an entire page in which he went, that whole seeing the future trying to prevent crimes thing, that was dumb, and I'm sorry for doing that. I should not have done that at all. That was totally wrong on my part. So he tried to come in here and try to redeem it by addressing that, but man, it's to that point in which it's going to be hard to come back from a year worth of events leading up to her character just getting wrecked. But I was hoping, okay, Generations, this could be another step. We need another step in the right direction. It might take a couple more steps, but we're going to get Carol back to where she needs to be. I don't really think this issue did. I mean, it tried to. Like, I will say that the lesson that they try to have her learn is that she's getting really ticked off at this alien council that's like, no, you can't interfere in this war. And she's about to tell them all off. And then Marvel comes in there and is like, no, don't say anything. It's okay. And he's like, he always thinks he knows best. And then he very politely explains to them why they need to go in there and politely explains, we're sorry, we did not mean to interfere with anything. And then she goes, all right, sometimes he does know best. So it was kind of like a moment of her admitting, it's like, okay, I've been a little bit too brash lately, which I think is a problem that many writers have had with Captain Marvel ever since Kelly Sue DeConnick left. Not even Kelly Sue. Like I said, the Alpha Flight series started off very well with her. But Kelly Sue made her very independent, very headstrong, a leader type character. And it seems like a lot of other writers have kind of interpreted that as her just being a jerk. And that's the way a lot of writers have continued to write her. And like, that's the number one thing that needs to be fixed about her character. You need to take her back to being headstrong and independent, not a jerk. There's a huge difference between those things. So in that moment, it's like, okay, it feels kind of like they're kind of addressing. It's like, okay, I've been a little bit too aggressive. We'll go with that word. B-E aggressive. Man, this episode's been going long when you know I'm getting loopy like that. Anyway, but then there's also a moment in which she's talking about, I feel like I need to do things, I feel like I need to go out here and do this, which does kind of address the stuff that happened to her in Civil War II, that feeling of, I need to be responsible for protecting everyone. And Marvel kind of goes, you ain't the only one who's lost things. Listen, we've all had stuff lost. I've gone through all these different adventures, and it's like, okay, I see that's the lesson you're trying to teach her. It's like, okay, it's okay to not have to protect everyone. Everybody is out there fighting right now. We've all gone through loss. So it's like, okay, that's the lesson he's trying to teach her. But one of the problems with this is that I never really got that feeling that she was like, ah, now I've learned. Like all these other characters, there's that moment where they're like, oh, I see, I understand now. I didn't really get that from here. But the other big problem with this issue is just, man, the art and the writing in here, it feels like they went back in time 30, 40 years and grabbed someone whose art has not been updated since then. Because it is just so basic and bland. And the art in every single one of these has been really damn good. I've been really impressed with the arts that they got in these books. And the art in this one is just so, the art in this issue is what people who don't read comics think art in comic books look like. Like, it is just very standard meat and potatoes comic book art. And there's a lot of moments in here that just don't work, where the art actually becomes lazy. Like, there's a moment when Carol is talking to Annihilus face to face, and the next panel, Annihilus shoots her, but he shoots her in the back. I was like, so did Annihilus fly all the way around? Did Carol just turn around for something? It's just so odd, some of the art choices they make in this thing. But also, man, I hate saying this, because this is the first thing that I've ever seen her write. Not this particular issue, but all of Captain Marvel for the past year. Marguerite Stoll just is not a good match for this book. She really isn't. I'm not saying that she can't write comics. I mean, heck, she's an established author. She's written books before, so she definitely can write. And she might be a good fit on another book, but I think you need to try putting her on another book, because she's just proven in the past year she can't write Captain Marvel. Like, she just does not get that character. I mentioned how the writers who have tackled Captain Marvel in the past couple of years really knew how to capture the feeling of someone being strong and smart and independent and brave. And Margaret Stoll just kind of makes her like, yeah, I don't care, whatever. Yeah. Why are you talking to me right now? Just, she really gives her too much attitude. It's somebody who does not know how to correctly write attitude compared to writing a jerk. But also, as I mentioned, the artwork really looked like artwork from older days of comics. The dialogue really matches that too. And artwork from the older days of comics can still hold up. Old dialogue does not hold up. The dialogue in here, oh man, it is just so basic. Again, as I said, Marguerite Stoll, I have not read her books. They could be fantastic, and I think if you put her on a different book, maybe that might be a better fit for her. I think you should, try and shift her around, find another book that really speaks to her. But she just doesn't get Captain Marvel. I hate saying that, but yeah, it's just not working. But we're not done with Carol Danvers just yet, because now we're going into the Miss Marvel series, in which Kamala Khan goes back in time. And the first thing that I will say, this is the most interesting approach to the going back in time thing, because, of course, Marvel's timeline, it doesn't move like ours does. Like, basically 4 or 5 of our years is equal to 1 of their years. So you have to keep taking all those comics that started in the 60s and keep scrunching them up and moving them up ever so much, because otherwise Peter Parker would be 70 years old at this point. So the comics that happened in the 70s didn't actually happen in the 70s. At this point, they happened in like 2005. But Kamala Khan goes back in time to when Carol Danvers first became Miss Marvel, which was back in the 70s, and it's actually the 70s. Like, she goes back there and lands there, and everybody is dressed different. Like, even the color tone of New York City looks different. Like, it looks like something from an old 1970s New York film. And there's a moment where she goes into a clothing store and says, "What can I get for 20 bucks?" And they go, "Oh, you can get everything in here." And she basically just walks out with a whole new wardrobe. So I actually kind of really dug that. I really dug that that G. Will Wilson, the writer of this book, had a totally different approach to this. That's one of the things I do have to applaud all these Generation books. Every single one of them had their own unique taste to them. They had their own unique flavor. Every single one of these writers decided to do something completely different from all the other writers, and I think that's awesome. As I said, I don't want giant Marvel things where you have to pick up every single issue and they all have to link up and they all have to make absolute sense. Single issue things that stand on their own, that really let these writers do whatever they want to do, I applaud that. I actually think that is what Marvel should be doing more, and that's what they did here, so cool. So Kamala Khan goes back in time to when Carol Danvers was running Woman magazine. Yes, many people forget that Carol Danvers didn't just go from being a fighter pilot right into being an Avenger. There was a stage in the middle there where she was actually the editor-in-chief for a magazine called Woman Magazine, which was meant to be the Marvel Comics version of Real Life magazine, Ms. Magazine. Now, Kamala goes in there, and she has to work with Carol, pretending to be the intern there, because she's like, "Listen, I've seen enough sci-fi stuff to know, if I'm dropped right here at this time where Carol Danvers is, clearly I'm here for a reason. I have to make something happen in order to go back to my own time." So she goes undercover there and walks around the office pretending to be the intern. And it's at a time in which Woman Magazine, the sales are down. They try to get very political in the book, try to address a lot of real world issues, and the sales are down, which it does not take a genius to see. This is actually meant to be commentary on what is going on at Marvel right now. Because yes, Marvel has recently tried to talk about lots of political issues. They try to talk about a lot of real world issues. And they have seen their sales go down, and there's been this big argument about, okay, well, is that what's causing it? Is it other factors that's causing it? And I love that this issue was just basically addressing that. It was basically going, okay, well, how do we save Woman Magazine? And Kamala herself is in a very weird situation, because all these other heroes look up to their predecessors. They all look up to those people who were the original versions of their heroes. Kamala is the one, though, who looks at this and goes, Carol and I aren't getting along right now. I actually kind of hate the things she's done recently, so it's kind of odd for me to be here and see her at her younger self. But basically what happens in here is that after they go out and they team up together and they fight together, Kamala then goes, wait a minute, I got it. I've been saying everything has to be my way, Carol's been saying everything has to be her way. The answer is compromise, and it's okay to compromise. And so what Kamala does is she writes an article for Woman Magazine that is all about politics and protesting, but also makeup. It's makeup tips in there that go along with protesting, and they put that in the magazine, and then people are like, oh, okay, I'm going to buy this up. And then Kamala basically goes up to Carol and goes, listen, it's very important to go out there and talk about real world issues, to address things that are actually happening, to talk about politics and talk about all these big issues. However, if you do that 24/7, you're going to get exhausted. You're going to go insane. She tells Carol, it's okay just to have fun every now and again. Sometimes you need that breather, but also it's okay just to like the things that you like. You don't have to be really big and firm all the time. Sometimes you can just be yourself, because if you're always afraid to be yourself, then hey man, you've kind of already lost the battle. And I think that that was actually kind of a really cool speech for her to give. But also, it really summed up what I love about G. Willow Wilson's run on Miss Marvel. That has been, for years now, one of my favorite books at Marvel. And this little speech from Kamala kind of summed up what makes that book work. Because if you read that book, you know, it does talk about topical stuff. It does talk about political topics. I mean, if you read the most recent storyline, I won't go into what it's about because it is about a ton of things, but it was very topical, very relevant, very political. However, that book is also about a girl who just loves fanfics and video games and just being herself. It is a fun, upbeat book at times, and then it becomes a serious political book at times. I think that book is a wonderful balance between these two things, and it was basically Kamala saying, you don't always have to be this thing. You can sometimes be the other thing. Balance, that's what you need. And I dug that this storyline was her learning that lesson through her mentor character, but not because of it. The mentor character didn't have to sit down and tell it to her. She was able to learn it from her mentor character's actions, but her mentor character, Carol Danvers, was able to learn this lesson as well. It was the lesson that she needed to hear. And it actually made me go, okay, well, is this going to kind of help reestablish the bond between her and Carol? I would love to see, after she goes back to the present, I would love to see an issue where she just sits down with Carol and goes, listen, I learned some lessons. And I think that we need to have just a discussion about all the stuff that we've been through recently. Okay, we've only got 2 more of these left. I'm going to go into Miles Morales and Peter Parker's Spider-Man Generations book. Now, this is one that I was kind of looking forward to because if you guys know me, you know Peter Parker is my guy. He is that guy who I started reading comics with. I've followed him all these years. He has always been my favorite superhero, and I love Miles. Miles is a great addition to the Spider-Man legacy. He is what a legacy character should be. Peter Parker was always famous because he was the everyman. Miles is the everyman. He carries on what Spider-Man should be, so great. I cannot wait to see him go back in time. This was a really damn good issue. It's by Brian Michael Bendis, and as I mentioned earlier, every time that Bendis does something I hate, there's someone else out there that he does, I'm like, man, you kind of nailed it on this one. And for me, yeah, I kind of think that he nailed it with this issue. Granted, there is some that Bendis speak in there again that I really cannot stand, but it's not nearly as bad as it was in the Iron Man issue. But what this one is about, Miles goes back in time to when Peter was in college, and it's him writing into Peter on the day of his biggest struggle. There was an issue of Spider-Man that you have probably seen referenced thousands of times. It's one of the most common panels from Spider-Man you've ever seen. It was the adventure where his Aunt May was dying and he had to go and get a cure for her, and it was being held by Dr. Octopus, and he gets the cure, but he is now trapped in this underwater base that is crumbling around him, and he's got the giant thing on his shoulder, and he basically lifts an entire building off of himself in order to go and get this to Aunt May and save her life. It's him there on that day struggling with this, and this issue starts off with Miles running into Peter at college, and then he runs into Harry Osborn, Flash Thompson, and Gwen Stacy, and they take this almost exactly from the actual book. Like, the way that the panels are framed, the clothes that they're wearing, it's all exactly from that. The dialogue might even be exactly the same for all I know. I can't remember the dialogue off the top of my head, but I remember those panels, sure enough. But Miles walks past them, and Flash is like, that loser Parker. Oh man, if you're going to go and prank Parker, I'm all for that. Like, Harry is saying this stuff with Flash. Because yeah, when Harry was first introduced, he didn't like Peter. They weren't friends at first. They hated each other. And Miles walks past him and hears this and goes, "What is wrong with you?" And they're like, "I'm sorry." He's like, "That dude thinks you're his friend, okay? Why on earth are you acting this way?" I was like, oh my god. Pete needed a friend. That's what this is. Miles goes back in time just so Pete can have some guy to like talk with. Some guy to kind of look out for him. Because Pete, a lot of people think, okay, well Pete, he had Harry Osborn there and that was his friend. And he had Gwen to talk to and MJ was there. He didn't have any of that until deep into college. All throughout high school, he didn't have anyone to talk to. All throughout high school, he was a loser. When he got to college, he started off as a loser. Everyone hated him. It took a little while for him to actually form some friends. So this is Miles going back to when he was at his most pathetic, when he had no one around, when he had no friends, nobody to talk to, everybody hated him. And it's Miles just coming in here and going, "Leave the poor guy alone." And I was like, oh, Miles, you sweet angel. Oh, that's why we love you, Miles. You came back there and you stood up for Peter Parker, the guy who needed someone to stand up for him. But after all this, Peter, he's at home. And again, it's like panel for panel the exact sequence in which he is talking about how hard it is to be Spider-Man, about all the things that he's been through. And then Miles comes in through his window and he's like, "Why are you here? Did you hear all that?" He's like, "It's cool. Listen, man, I don't know what's going on, but I'm from the future. I'm Spider-Man. You helped train me. We're friends. I just need to come here and talk. And honestly, I think you need someone to talk to." And Pete kind of accepts this because he's a superhero, so this stuff is going to naturally happen to him at some point in time. And he goes, "All right, well, if you're from the future, you probably know this happened." And he goes, "No, I don't know any of this stuff. What's happened to you?" And he tells him about what he just went through, about having to lift up the giant structure, about having to save his aunt and do all this stuff. And you can tell he's exhausted. He's still wearing wet clothes. He has not slept in days. His back is killing him from having to lift that thing up. He is passing out as he tells Miles the story. And then Miles just looks at him like after he falls asleep and goes, "You always told me stuff about being Spider-Man, but I never saw how personal it was. I never saw the pain it put you through being Spider-Man. I never saw this was your life. This was what defined you, being Spider-Man. It was a very special part of you. And you decided to let me have part of that. You decided to let me carry this on. And I cannot thank you enough for that. Like, I thought it was just a mantle, but I didn't understand. This is a part of you, and you gave that part of you to me. And it was a very personal, a very deep part of your life. So this means a lot to me, and I just want to thank you for that." And I love that, because I love legacy characters. Because to me, legacy characters are in no way a disrespect to the older characters. I know so many people who think that they are. To me, legacy characters are saying those older characters are so great, they're going to continue on. They establish something that will carry on for generations. Not to be a pun on the title of this series. But I know a lot of people out there who's like, "Oh, well, they're just shoving the old characters aside." And when you look over at DC, I can almost kind of see their point. Because at Marvel, yeah, a lot of these characters, they did kind of just get shoved to the side when these new characters came in here. Spider-Man did. Spider-Man stuck around, but a lot of these other ones got tossed aside. But over at DC, Wally carries on the legacy of the Flash. He never shuts up about how great Barry was. He never once stops to go, "Hey man, Barry Allen, whatever." He will always let you know Barry Allen was my #1 inspiration. The same thing goes for all the Green Lanterns. They always talk about the Green Lanterns that came before him. Like, this goes for all the legacy characters over at DC, whereas Marvel, they never really captured that. Here it was that moment of the legacy character going, "You know what? That guy before me, he got it. That guy before me, he was something special, and it's special that I'm carrying that on." It's like, man, this was the best way to kind of show how special both of you are. How great the two of you are, and how you're both part of this one wonderful thing. And that how Miles being a legacy character celebrates the life of Peter Parker, while at the same time starting his own new journey, going into something brand new for him. Okay, we're now going into the final part, and thank God, because my voice is destroyed. I really should have split this into 2 parts. But the final one is Captain America, Sam Wilson, and Steve Rogers. And this is a special issue because it is the end of Nick Spencer's run on Captain America. It is the big finale to that. I'll admit, as a finale, it's actually pretty darn good, but it's also a very important issue because this is the issue where Sam Wilson decides to stop being Captain America and give it back to Steve Rogers. And you guys know I'm probably going to have some opinions on that, because I have said many times on this show, I actually love Sam Wilson as Captain America. I think that that character actually carries on the legacy of Captain America, but in a very different way. Like, I think that he actually talks about issues from a very different point of view, and honestly, just speaking from a personal point, I actually love having a Captain America who calls people out on their bullcrap. To me, that is what defines Sam Wilson. He's not afraid to go in there and tell people, shut your mouth. So I am very torn about this issue, because on the one hand, I don't want Sam to stop being Captain America, but on the other hand, this was a pretty darn good issue. And I mentioned earlier, I love that every single one of these writers went in there and did their own unique thing with these stories. They basically just had the premise of they go back there, meet their older self, learn a lesson from it, come back to the future. This one is the most different out of all of them, because Sam Wilson goes back, and it's in World War II, and he goes there, and he's like, alright, I'm just going to lay low for a little bit, wait until whatever this time travel thing is pulls me back. He gets a job, starts working there, and then after being there for like a few weeks, he goes, even if I'm just temporarily here, even if I'm a time traveler and I shouldn't be affecting anything, I keep seeing all these newsreels of other young men sign up to go overseas and fight in this war. I can't just stand by and let that happen and not do anything. I can't stand here and just refuse to help out. If I can go in there and make some kind of a change, I should. So he signs up, goes in there to fight, and you see him going through basic training, and then you see him fighting in World War II, and you see him actually design his own wings, and then go in there and fight side by side with classic Captain America with his new wings. Basically, it's the Falcon and Cap in World War II times. I found this to be real interesting because I was like, you know what? A lot of people have a problem with Sam Wilson being Captain America because they say, like, listen, it's important that Captain America fought in World War II. You now have Sam Wilson going through all of World War II. It's not like he goes on an adventure with Captain America and then after he goes on that adventure, he's then taken back to the present. He goes through all of World War II in this thing. So I was like, does this mean that now Sam has the same experience in the battlefield as Steve Rogers? Kind of makes me want him to remain being Captain America even more now. But I've actually really dug the interactions between him and Steve in this, because this whole time Sam had been thinking, how do I live up to the legacy of this? How do I live up to Steve Rogers? How do I continue on what he created? And then he sees Steve Rogers on like his first day on the job, and he runs into the bushes and throws up. And I was like, oh my God, yeah, you forget this was, you know, Steve was still just a kid from Brooklyn. The first time you go into war, it doesn't matter who you are, it's going to affect you. So seeing Sam Wilson actually have to interact with young Steve Rogers, seeing Steve Rogers now being the one saying, so many people have expectations of me wearing this costume, I don't know if I can live up to that. Like, this is the exact stuff that Sam Wilson said to himself when he put on that costume. Which again made me go, okay, why are you not keeping him as Captain America? He's now seeing that Steve Rogers went through the same stuff that he did when he became Captain America. But so he goes through all of World War II, and then after that he's like, alright, well, I'm just gonna get a job, and he becomes a pastor because that's what his father was, and he now lives through the rest of the 40s, and he lives into the 50s, and he joins the Civil Rights Movement, and at that point I'm like, you've now been here for decades, this is getting odd. And he settles down, and he marries a woman, and he has a child, and he raises that child, and they have a grandchild. And I'm like, you've been here, you're an old man now. What on earth is going to happen? And he actually watches as Steve Rogers is found in the ice, and he's like, it's good to have you back, old friend. And then he goes there just to see him, and he's like, I'm not going to stay for long. And then after he sees him, Steve stops everything and goes, my wingman, my wingman, you saved my life so many times. And they come in and they start talking. And now that Sam has become a pastor, Steve, throughout the rest of his time in the Avengers, comes to him whenever he's in doubt and actually like confesses stuff to him. And like, wow, this is a whole new dynamic to their relationship. This is actually great seeing this happen. This is such a great twist on everything we knew about these two characters. So that keeps going on, and he says he watches his younger self now join Cap, and the two of them fighting side by side. And he felt a little bit jealous that he couldn't be out there again, but he's like, you know what? It's good to see. Like, those are the days. I remember that. And then he watches that moment when he himself became Captain America, and he said, yeah, but that's not me anymore. I watched myself, my younger self, all this time, and it makes me realize, seeing me as the younger Captain America, that wasn't me up there. And there was a moment in which, after Steve Rogers lost the super soldier serum and he became an old man, that you had the two of them, now as old men, sitting on the front porch talking to each other, and that was just a super sweet moment. I just love seeing the two of them actually just sitting together at the same age, just chatting with each other. It was just one of those things that made you go, wow, these two have been through so much together, which is incredible because the most stuff that they had been through together happened in this one issue. So I love seeing that. And there was a moment in which he was like, yeah, well, that kid who you just gave the shield to, who just became Captain America, he's going to have a hard time living up to that legacy. And Steve was basically like, listen, I couldn't even live up to it first. You know who helped me with that? You did. You helped me through this. And when Sam got back to the present, after all this had happened, and he gets back to the present, he then kind of decides to give it up because it made him realize the moment that I was at my best was when I was me. And I'm not Captain America, I'm the Falcon. I'm not Steve Rogers, and I was always trying to be Steve Rogers. I need to go back to being Sam Wilson, because when I was Sam Wilson, I helped Captain America find who he was. I helped all these people through all these generations. I raised a family. I did all these special things. I helped all these people in the military as Sam Wilson. And when I was Captain America, I was not Sam Wilson. I was always trying to be someone else. So he gave the shield back to Cap with a note attached to it that said, you're going to get through this. You will be fine. You're going to rise back up and be Captain America again. And honestly, it was a great ending to Nick Spencer's arc, because it was that great moment of Captain America Steve Rogers is in a lot of doubt right now. He's in a very dark place, but he's going to find himself. He's going to rise back up. He's going to become Captain America again. But it also gave a reason why Sam Wilson would want to go back to being the Falcon. I mentioned several times that my problem with Sam Wilson going back to being the Falcon is that Captain America stands for something. It actually means something. I know people are going to say, well, every superhero means something. Yeah, but Captain America means something special. That actually has a very specific meaning behind it. But also, throughout all of Sam Wilson's time as Captain America, you had people on the news, you had other superheroes, you had the general public telling Sam, you're not my Captain America. You don't stand for what I stand for. Give back the shield. We want you to give back the shield. And I kept saying, if Sam Wilson gives back the shield, it looks like defeat. It looks like he's saying, yeah, they're right about me. I'm not Captain America. But this one issue was able to come in here and go, you know what? That's not why I'm doing it. I'm not doing it for them. I'm doing it for me. So even though I do want Sam to remain being Captain America, this one issue did give a good reason for it. However, at the same time, all of Secret Empire was basically leading up to him embracing the role of Captain America. All of Secret Empire was leading up to Sam going, I'm not going to be Captain America. I'm not going to be Captain America. You know what? People need Captain America, and I'm Captain America. He picks up that shield, he puts on his costume, he flies out there, he saves the day, and he goes, I'm Captain America, darn it. I'm going to go in there, I'm going to be the hero everyone needs. And that was 10 issues of that leading up. As I said, all Nick Spencer's run on Sam Wilson as Captain America was about the fall of Sam Wilson, and then Secret Empire was him rising back up. And then in one issue, you have him quit being it. It really makes me think, this wasn't planned. This really wasn't planned. You had Secret Empire as the event that would go, Sam Wilson is Captain America. We're standing by this. What's that? People don't like it? We're going to have one issue that undoes everything we just did in Secret Empire. So that's my problem with this. is that it really feels, even if this was planned, which I don't know how much of it was planned, because if you'll notice, I'm not talking about the Nova Generations book. Yeah, they announced some Generation books that even they had to cut out because they changed their plans at the last second. So it's very clear a lot of this stuff from Generation came at the last minute. So it really does feel to me like they came in here and were like, okay, we're going to keep him as Captain America. Wait, changed our mind. I know you already wrapped up the story. Let's do this event thing so that in one issue we can undo that thing. So yeah, honestly, it's a very weird place that I find myself in with this. I do wish he was still Captain America. I'm going to miss him as Captain America. I will always think of him as being my favorite Captain America. I'm not kidding. I know people hate me for saying that, but I did love him as Captain America. But this issue does give a good reason for him to stop being Captain America. It just feels like they brought it up out of nowhere after a 10-issue long series all about him becoming Captain America. So whatever. Anyway, it's done. It's over with. Who cares? Until next week, when I answer all the questions that you have down below about that. Yeah, remember that I said at the beginning of this episode? Leave your questions for next week's Q&A in the comments down below. But I'm going to wrap this up very quickly because I have to go back to making more Halloween episodes and my voice is completely destroyed. If you like this video, then share it around the web. Hit that subscribe button. Hit that like button. Follow me on Twitter at twitter.com/ProfessorThorgy. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Come back next time. Bye. Oh my god. Bleh.